He was 8 years old the first time the whole world fell in love with him. A scream, 2 hands pressed against his cheeks, a face that became one of the most recognized images in the history of cinema. Every December for 35 years, that same face plays on televisions in millions of homes, and millions of people smile without ever once wondering what was actually happening to the boy behind it. What really happened to Macaulay Culkin is not the story you think you know. It is not a simple tale of a child star who burned out and disappeared. It is the story of a boy who, by his own words, was locked in hotel rooms with what he calls a dangerous man. A boy who quit his own father at 14 years old and somehow had the courage to do it. A boy who lost a sister, lost a childhood, and still found his way to something that looks, against every single odd, like genuine peace. Stay until the end, because the final chapter of this story will completely change the way you see that little boy screaming into the camera every Christmas. This is what really happened to Macaulay Culkin. Macaulay Carson. Culkin was born on August 26, 1980 in New York City, one of 7 children born to Kit Culkin and Patricia Brentrup. His father was a failed stage actor who never made it himself, and according to Macaulay, he decided early on that his children would succeed where he had not. Several of Macaulay's siblings, Rory, Kieran, Quinn, Christian, Shane, and his sister Dakota, were all pushed toward the stage and the screen at young ages. 2 of his brothers, Rory and Kieran, would go on to build genuinely successful adult careers, with Kieran eventually winning an Academy Award. Macaulay began acting at just 4 years old. By 1990, at age 9, he starred in a small Christmas comedy nobody expected much from. Home Alone made over $476 million worldwide on an $18 million budget. Overnight, a child from a struggling Manhattan family became the single most famous kid on the entire planet. And that is exactly where what really happened to Macaulay Culkin starts to diverge sharply from what really happened on the screen. What the world saw was joy. What Macaulay has said again and again in his own words, across decades of interviews, was something else entirely happening just out of frame. Speaking on Marc Maron's WTF podcast in 2018, Culkin described his father as mentally and physically abusive, and said Kit was jealous of his success, recalling threats like "do good or I'll hit you." Sit with that phrase for a second. A father threatening violence against a child over how well that child performed for the cameras. He has said the abuse touched his mother and all 6 of his siblings, but because he was so often the one on the road, alone with his father for weeks at a time, he absorbed the worst of it personally. In a 2025 podcast appearance, he put it as plainly and as painfully as a person can. A lot of the time when I was on the road doing things, it was just me and him, so I was kind of locked in a room with a crazy person, a 9-year-old boy, the biggest movie star alive, and by his own account, genuinely afraid to be alone with his own father. That contrast is the real story that nobody tells when they talk about what really happened to Macaulay Culkin. He has said he can show you all his scars if he wanted to. He has called his father, with no softening whatsoever, a bad man. There was one person, Macaulay says, who saw it before almost anyone else did. His Uncle Buck co-star, the legendary and gentle John Candy. In a 2025 documentary about Candy's life, Culkin recalled that even before Home Alone changed everything, it was not hard to see how difficult my father was. It was no secret. He was already a monster. Candy, a 6'2", nearly 300-pound comedy giant, quietly checked in on him. "Are you doing good? Everything all right at home?" Small questions. Enormous meaning. Candy died of a heart attack in 1994 at just 43 years old. Macaulay has described him simply as one of the only real father figures he ever had. His parents finally split during the filming of Richie Rich in 1994, and that divorce became the crack in the door Macaulay needed. He has said he used the only leverage a famous 14-year-old has, fame itself, to refuse court-ordered visits with his father, telling his own lawyer he would rather risk jail than spend another visitation with him. He never had to actually play that card, but the fact that he was willing to says everything about what he had survived by that point. At 14, with his parents consumed by their split, Macaulay made the decision himself. "I quit," he later recalled telling them. I hope you guys had a good time. I hope you guys all made as much money as you possibly could because there's no more coming from me. He legally removed both his parents from his trust fund and hired an independent executor to protect what was left of his earnings. It is often misreported as legal emancipation. It wasn't. It was a 14-year-old finally taking back control of the only thing that was ever truly his. The years that followed were quiet, almost deliberately invisible. A film here, a strange parody band there, but mostly silence, while the tabloids filled the void with rumor and speculation that Culkin has since dismissed as wildly exaggerated. The one relationship from this period that drew real public scrutiny was his lifelong friendship with Michael Jackson, which began in his childhood. In 2005, amid serious child sexual abuse allegations against Jackson, Culkin testified on his behalf in court, stating plainly that Jackson never did anything to me. Jackson was acquitted that year. Culkin later reflected on what they shared. Two people who, in his words, never really had the chance to be children when they actually were children, because fame had already taken that from both of them. It is worth noting Kit Culkin has not given a detailed public response to his son's specific allegations against him. And the picture we have comes almost entirely from Macaulay's own side of the story. And then, slowly, without fanfare, the comeback came. Small Roles, a genuinely strange and beloved podcast and website called Bunny Ears, finally giving him full control of his own narrative. A modeling campaign for Gucci. A recurring role in American Horror Story. In December 2023, he received his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, with Catherine O'Hara, the woman who played his mother in Home Alone, standing proudly beside him, and quietly, in 2017, the most important chapter of this entire story began. He started a relationship with fellow former child star Brenda Song. The actress millions knew as London Tipton on Disney's The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. They met on the set of the 2019 film Changeland and kept the relationship almost entirely private for years, refusing to let the public own this part of his life the way it had owned everything else. In April 2021, they welcomed their first son. They named him Dakota, a direct, deeply intentional tribute to Macaulay's own sister, who had died in December 2008 after being struck by a car. Read that again. The man who lost his childhood to a father who hurt him, who lost his sister far too soon, chose to carry her name forward into the next generation of his own family. In late 2022, they welcomed a second son, Carson, and the couple got engaged in January 2022. Two boys, raised quietly, raised gently, by a father determined to give them everything he never had himself. As for Kit Culkin, the silence has now lasted more than 30 years, and Macaulay shows no interest in ending it. He deserves it too, Culkin said flatly on a podcast in 2025 when asked if the estrangement bothered him. There is no anger in his voice when he says it anymore, just distance. The kind of distance a person only reaches after they have fully made peace with a decision they made a very long time ago. His net worth in 2026 sits at an estimated $25 million, almost entirely earned during his childhood and managed for him since he turned 18. He has spoken with real honesty about how strange that feels. "I didn't see it until I turned 18, he told Ellen DeGeneres in 2018. "I call it the slip of paper meeting, where they pretty much put a number on a piece of paper and slide it across the table and then, boom, there you go." He has said it felt like inheriting the earnings of some kid who worked really, really hard. A kid he sometimes struggles to fully recognize as the man he is today. And despite Home Alone airing constantly every single December for over 3 decades, Culkin receives no ongoing royalties from it whatsoever. Every dollar he has came from contracts signed long ago, not from the film's endless popularity now. So what really happened to Macaulay Culkin? Today, at 45 years old, the answer is something far better than anyone watching him scream on screen in 1990 could have predicted. He voices a character in Zootopia 2. He has a recurring role in Amazon's Fallout. In January 2026, he stepped back into the spotlight to present an award at the Golden Globes, met with the kind of warm applause reserved for someone the public watched grow up, fall apart in private, and quietly rebuild himself without ever once asking anyone for pity along the way. He raises two young sons with Brenda Song. Away from cameras, away from headlines, away from everything that was once done to him. He has not spoken to his father in over 30 years and is, by every account, completely at peace with that silence. He has taken the most painful chapters of his life and turned them into something he can finally talk about with humor and distance instead of only pain. The boy who once said he and Michael Jackson would both be 8 years old forever because they never got the chance to actually be 8 when they were, eventually did get to grow up. He just had to do it on his own terms, decades later than anyone should ever have to. That is what really happened to Macaulay Culkin. Not a tragedy with no ending. A long, complicated, deeply human story. And one that, for the first time in his entire life, he finally gets to write himself. If this story moved you today, hit that like button and subscribe if you are not already part of this family. Drop a comment below and tell me, after hearing the full story, does Home Alone hit differently for you now? Until next time, we will see you in the next one.